The knock at midnight. It was a cold, moonless night when Sarah first heard the knock. She had been curled up on her couch, a blanket draped over her legs, scrolling through her phone to distract herself from the eerie silence of her rural home. The knock was soft, almost polite, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She froze, her thumb hovering over the screen, and listened. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came again, more insistent this time. Sarah glanced at the clock on the wall. 12:03 a.m. Who could possibly be at her door at this hour? She lived miles from the nearest town, and her closest neighbor was a good 10-minute drive away. Her heart began to race as she set her phone down and stood, the blanket falling to the floor. She approached the door cautiously, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The porch light was on, casting a faint glow through the frosted glass of the front door. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob, and peered through the peephole. Two children stood on her porch, a boy and a girl, no older than 10. They were dressed in plain, outdated clothing. The boy in a button-up shirt and slacks, the girl in a faded dress. Their faces were pale, almost ghostly, and their expressions were blank. But it was their eyes that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Their eyes were completely black, like two voids where their soul should have been. Sarah stumbled back from the door, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. The children didn't move. They just stood there, staring at the door as if they could see her through it. "Please let us in," the girl's voice called, soft and pleading, "we're cold." Sarah's mind raced. Something about their voices was wrong, too calm, too measured, like they were reciting lines from a script. She backed away from the door, her heart pounding in her chest. "We need to use your phone," the boy added, his tone eerily flat. "Our car broke down." Sarah's instincts screamed at her not to open the door. She reached for her phone on the coffee table, her hands trembling as she dialed 911. The line connected, but before she could speak, the girl's voice cut through the silence again. "We can see you, Sarah." Her blood ran cold. How did they know her name? She hadn't told them. She hadn't even spoken. The 911 operator's voice crackled through the phone. "What's your emergency?" Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. The knocking started again, louder this time, more frantic. The children's voices overlapped, growing more desperate. "Let us in, Sarah, we're so cold." "We just want to come inside." "You don't want to leave us out here, do you?" Sarah dropped the phone and backed away, her eyes fixed on the door. The knocking grew louder, more violent, until the entire frame seemed to shake. She could hear the wood splintering under the force. "Please, Sarah," the girl's voice whispered, now coming from directly behind the door. "We're already inside." Sarah's breath hitched. She turned and ran for the kitchen, grabbing a knife from the block on the counter. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold it. The knocking stopped abruptly and the house fell silent. For a moment, she thought it was over. Then she heard it, the soft creak of footsteps in the hallway. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching the knife, her eyes darting toward the doorway. The footsteps grew closer, slow and deliberate, until the children appeared in the kitchen entrance. Their black eyes locked onto hers, and they smiled. "We told you we were cold," the girl said, tilting her head. "Now we're home." Sarah screamed, but no one was around to hear her. The children stepped forward, their shadows stretching long and dark across the floor, and as the knife slipped from her hand, Sarah realized the truth. They had never been outside the house at all.